My parents didn't kick me out with a trash bag 8 years ago because of my brother's drunk driving. They did it because I found the one thing in our basement I was never, ever supposed to see. The sentence is a ghost, a permanent, whispering resident in the attic of my mind. For 8 years, I've built a life, a personality, an entire existence on the bedrock of a single painful story. That my golden child brother Jake had a drunk driving accident and my parents, in their hysterical, grief-stricken state, needed a scapegoat. That scapegoat was me. It was a clean, brutal story. A story of favoritism, so extreme it curdled into something monstrous. It was a story I told myself survived the cold nights on my friend's couch, the story that fueled me through double shifts and all-night study sessions. It was my origin story, my burden, and my reason to never look back. I did more than survive. I built a fortress. I worked 3 jobs through community college, clawed my way into a state university, and now, at 25, I have a career in data security that I'm good at. It's quiet, logical work. There are rules, firewalls, clear protocols for breaches. There is no emotional chaos. And 3 months ago, I used the quiet, logical money I saved to buy a small, modest house. It's my fortress of solitude. The past was a locked box, welded shut and buried deep. I was safe. Then the lock clicked open. The phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was a fragile, trembling thing on the verge of shattering. A sound I almost didn't recognize yet felt in the marrow of my bones. "Mia? Honey? It's Mom." A long, static-filled pause. We need to talk. It's important. It's about what happened." My entire body went cold. Mom. The word was a relic. The woman attached to it was a ghost who had stood by, silent and weeping, as my father handed me that coarse, black trash bag and told me to get my crap out of his house. The woman who hadn't called, written, or even texted a happy birthday in 8 long years. Her voice alone was a key, turning in a lock I thought was rusted shut forever. Curiosity, I've learned, is a far more dangerous poison than hatred. Hatred is predictable. Curiosity is a labyrinth. Against every screaming instinct of self-preservation, I called back. The conversation was a minefield of agonizing, stilted small talk. "How are you?" "Fine." "You?" "Oh, getting by." The air between us, even over hundreds of miles of fiber optic cable, was thick with everything unsaid. Finally, her composure broke, and the real fear poured out. "It's your father," she said, her voice dropping to a frantic, hushed whisper, as if the walls themselves were listening. "He's sick, Mia. Really sick. And we need to see you. We need to come to you. It's not safe for us here anymore. Not safe." I echoed, completely thrown. My mind raced illogical, mundane conclusions. "What are you talking about? Is it money? Are you losing the house? Is it foreclosure?" I braced myself for the ask for cash, the plea to move in, the emotional blackmail I had prepared for in 1,000 hypothetical arguments. "It's so much more than that," she said, and I heard a genuine, bone-deep terror in her tone that no actor could ever fake. It was the sound of pure, undiluted panic. "The accident, Mia. Jake's accident. It wasn't what you think, what we made you think." She took a shuddering breath. "We had to make you leave. We had to make you hate us. It was the only way to protect you." I felt the solid floor of my new living room tilt violently beneath my feet. The world swam. "Protect me?" The words came out as a disbelieving whisper, then hardened into a shout. "You threw me out on the street with a garbage bag, in the middle of the night. What are you talking about, Mom?" "Not on the phone," she hissed, her voice dropping to an almost inaudible urgency. "Please, Mia, they could be listening. Just let us come. Just for a few days. We'll explain everything. We have to show you something." The audacity was galactic. It defied all reason. Yet, it was completely overshadowed by a terrifying, thrilling intrigue that coiled in my stomach. It wasn't what you think. The sentence was a key, and it was turning in the lock of my past. The entire foundation of my adult reality. The anger that kept me warm, the righteousness that fueled my ambition, cracked wide open in that single moment. Against every instinct that told me to hang up and change my number, I heard my own voice, calm and strange, say, "Okay, this weekend, but just you and Dad. Jake doesn't come. I don't want to see him." The silence on the other end was heavy, profound, and filled with a new kind of pain. Jake isn't with us anymore, Mia." My breath hitched in my throat. A cold dread washed over me. What? Is he dead? Had the golden child finally fallen for good? "Gone," she said, and the word was final, enigmatic, and utterly terrifying. It hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. "We'll explain when we see you." 2 days later, they were on my doorstep. They didn't look like my parents. They looked like poorly rendered photocopies of them, faded and distorted by time and terror. My father, once a broad-shouldered, perpetually angry man whose presence filled a room, was stooped, shrunken, and gray. His eyes, which used to flash with impatience, were now hollow and haunted, darting to every window and shadow. My mother was a nervous bird, a wisp of a woman clutching her purse like it was the only solid thing left in the world. They had one small, battered suitcase between them, a pitiful testament to their hasty flight. The first hour in my clean, quiet house was a minefield of awkward silence and stilted conversation over mugs of tea that went cold. They sat on the edge of my sofa, not leaning back, as if ready to bolt at any second. I saw them taking the details of my life, the framed prints on the wall, the books on the shelf, the simple piece of it, and I saw a flicker of something like regret in my mother's eyes. Finally, I couldn't take the suffocating tension anymore. I put my mug down with a definitive click. "Okay, you're here. You're in my house. Start talking. What was the real reason you kicked me out?" My father looked at my mother, a silent communication passing between them that was decades old, then down at his gnarled, trembling hands. When he spoke, his voice was a dry, raspy thing, like stones grinding together. "Do you remember what you were doing before you got the call about Jake? The night of the accident. Specifically." I frowned, sifting through the hazy memories of that terrible night. I was studying, in my room, for my chemistry final. Then the phone rang. It was Aunt Carol. But before that, my mother prompted gently, leaning forward. "You went down to the basement about an hour before to get a textbook from one of the old storage boxes, the ones with my old college stuff." A cold finger, sharp as an icicle, traced its way down my spine. I had forgotten that. The memory was a tiny, inconsequential detail buried under the avalanche of trauma that followed. "Yeah, maybe. I think so. So what does that have to do with anything?" My father leaned forward, his intense, bloodshot eyes locking onto mine. "What did you see down there, Mia?" I shrugged, frustration bubbling up. "Nothing. Boxes of Christmas decorations. Jake's old hockey gear, Dad's rusty tool set, that ugly old painting of a ship. And the loose floorboard," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "The one in the far corner, under the old workbench. The one that was slightly pried up. The one you finished prying open." The memory didn't just return. It slammed into me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I had seen it. A floorboard was slightly ajar, a sliver of ominous darkness visible beneath it. A childish, Nancy Drew curiosity had gotten the better of me. I'd found a flathead screwdriver on the bench, wedged it into the crack, and levered the warp board up with a groan of protesting wood. Inside wasn't a dead body or a pirate's treasure chest. It was a sleek black, waterproof plastic tub, the kind you'd store photos in. It looked utterly out of place amidst the dust and decay. Heart hammering with a mix of guilt and excitement, I'd lifted the lid. It was filled with neat, organized files. Passports, several of them, with our pictures but different names. Bundles of cash, banded together, more money than I had ever seen in my life. And nestled beside it all, black and cold and utterly terrifying, was a handgun. I'd stared at it, my teenage mind short-circuiting, trying to process this impossible tableau. My dad was a mid-level accountant. He wore khakis and liked crossword puzzles. This was not accountant stuff. This was movie stuff. This was scary stuff. The sound of a car pulling sharply into the driveway, my aunt arriving to tell me about Jake, had jolted me out of my stupor. In a blind panic, I'd slammed the lid shut, shoved the tub back into its hiding place, and kicked the floorboard into place, scrambling to wipe the dust over it. I'd run upstairs, and the ensuing chaos of the accident, the hospital, the yelling had completely overwritten and buried the memory until this very moment. How did you know that? I whispered, my own voice sounding distant and strange, because the tub was moved, just a quarter-inch. The perfect layer of dust we'd sprinkled over it, and the floorboard was disturbed. We knew someone had found it. My mother said, her hands twisting in her lap. And then, just hours later, Jake had his accident. My father took over, the story pouring out of him as if a dam had broken. It wasn't an accident, Mia. He was run off the road, forced into that fence. The men who did it were sending us a message. A very clear, very violent message. We were behind on a payment, the stuff in the basement. It wasn't ours. We were just holding it, storing it for very, very dangerous people. A debt my father had incurred, a life debt. I got roped into holding the package to work it off. I thought it was almost over. I was stupid. I was wrong. The world narrowed to a tunnel, with my father's haunted face at the end of it. My understanding of reality was shattering and reforming into something dark and grotesque. What are you saying? I breathed, though I was already beginning to understand. Jake's crash was a warning, a demonstration of their reach. And you finding the stash, they must have been watching the house. They saw you go down there. They saw you stay down there too long. They thought we were skimming from the cash, or talking to the authorities, or planning to run with their property. We had two choices. We could all disappear, which they would have taken as an admission of guilt and hunted us down like animals. Or we could give them a sacrifice, a plausible reason for the breach, a story they would believe. My mother reached for my hand, but I jerked it away as it burned. Her eyes filled with tears. We made you the reason, Mia. We created a huge, dramatic, family-shattering fight. We blamed you for Jake's accident in a public waiting room. We threw you out with a trash bag for the whole neighborhood to see. We made sure their people, who were always watching, heard every word. We made it look like you were a rebellious, angry teenager who had stumbled onto the stash by accident while sneaking around looking for booze or drugs, and that we had disowned you for it to prove our continued loyalty to them. We made you hate us so they would believe you knew nothing, that you were just a stupid, angry kid who'd seen something she didn't understand and had been cast out for an unrelated reason. We made you uninteresting to them. We made you safe. It was the only way. I sat there, utterly paralyzed. The anger I had nurtured for 8 years, the core of my identity, the engine of my survival, was evaporating, leaving behind a terrifying, hollow void. They hadn't thrown me out because they hated me. They had thrown me out in a twisted, horrific, desperate act of protection. The favoritism, the blame, It had all been a meticulously staged performance, and I had been the lead actor, never knowing my lines. The money? I stammered, my mind reeling. Protection money. Smuggled goods. I don't even know all of what was in those files. My father said, his shoulders slumping in defeat. It doesn't matter. The debt never ends. It just gets passed down. And Jake, I asked, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. You said he's gone. My mother let out a small, broken sob. After you left, the pressure didn't stop. The demands got worse. The debts got larger. Jake, he was never the same after crash. He was angry lost. He felt guilty for what happened to you, though he never knew the real reason. He got involved deeper to try and help, to be the hero, to protect us. He became a runner for them. 2 years ago, he was sent on a job. He crossed the wrong person. Or he tried to get out. We don't know. He vanished. We don't know if he's dead in a ditch or if he's just been told to disappear and never contact us again. We haven't heard from him since. The not knowing is its own kind of hell. My head was spinning. My brother, the golden child, wasn't a hero. He was a lost soul, another casualty in this invisible war I never knew we were fighting. And now, I asked, my voice numb, disconnected from my body. Why now? After 8 years of silence, why show up and tell me this now? The men holding the debt, the organization, there's a new boss. My father said, his face ashen. A younger, more ruthless one. He's consolidating power, cleaning up old, loose ends. And we are a very, very loose end. They've started watching the house again. Cars that sit too long. Hang-up calls in the middle of the night. A man came to the door last week asking for a package we were supposed to be holding. A package we never received. A setup. They're making their move. We're out of time. We had nowhere else to go. The truth was so much more monstrous, so much more insane than the simple, painful narrative of parental favoritism I'd lived with. They weren't just cruel parents. They were terrified, trapped people who had made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. They had sacrificed our relationship, my childhood, and their own souls to save my life. The anger was gone. In its place was a vast, chilling emptiness and a dawning, horrifying understanding. I looked at these two broken, elderly strangers in my home, and I felt a pity so profound it was almost physical pain. Okay, I said, the word leaving my lips before my brain had fully processed a decision. You can stay. For now. The following days were a tense, surreal bubble. We were a family reunited not by love, but by a shared, horrific trauma that none of us could fully speak about. The old dynamics were still there, my mother's nervous hovering, my father's stern silence, but they were now layered with profound, unspoken guilt and a constant, low-grade fear that hummed to the house like a faulty electrical wire. They jumped at the sound of the mail slot clattering. They peered through the blinds before taking out the trash. My fortress of solitude had been transformed into a safe house, and the quiet logic of my life had been replaced by paranoid chaos. I tried to maintain normalcy. I went to work, but my focus was shattered. I'd stare at lines of code and see my father's terrified eyes. I'd run a system diagnostic and remember the cold weight of that hidden gun. My safe, predictable world had been irrevocably invaded. A week after they arrived, I came home from work late. The house was dark and quiet. Too quiet. I found my father not in his room, but standing in the absolute darkness of the living room, staring out the window between the slats of the blinds. He was frozen, a statue of fear. "Mia," he said, without turning around. His voice was a taut wire. "Don't turn on the light. Don't come any further. Just stop right there." My blood, already chilled, turned to ice. "What is it?" I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. A black sedan. A BMW. 2 doors down. It wasn't there this morning. The fear in his voice was contagious, a virus spreading through the room. It was there yesterday, and the day before. Different spots, but always there. The past wasn't just in our heads anymore. It wasn't a story. It was parked on my street, watching my house. Watching me. The game had changed. They had found us. The terrifying realization dawned on me. My parents' desperate, sacrificial act 8 years ago had just been rendered null and void. By taking them in, I had pulled myself back into the crosshairs. I was interesting to them again. The safe, uninteresting teenager was now the adult harboring the liabilities. And the most chilling question now wasn't about the past, but about the future. Had my parents' twisted act to protect me ultimately put a permanent, inescapable target on my back? The stakes were no longer about family drama or healing old wounds. They were about raw, visceral survival. And as I stood there in the dark, my father's panic breathing the only sound, I realized with crystal clear, terrifying certainty that the key to it all, the debt, the danger, maybe even Jake's whereabouts, might still be hidden in that plastic tub in my parents' basement. A basement I no longer had access to. A basement that was undoubtedly being watched. The truth they had told me was only the prelude, the first chapter. The real story, the fight for our lives, was just about to begin. And I knew, with a sinking heart, that I was no longer just a victim of my past. I was about to become an active player in a war I never knew existed. The locked box of my history was open, and it was filled with weapons. It was time I learned how to use them.